Hello everyone, welcome to this video. So in this video we will be looking at the different layout managers which we can use in Java using the Swing framework. So first of all, let us look into the program. Before we go into the program, the layout managers basically are used to arrange the components in a particular manner, and it facilitates us to control the positioning and size of the components in the GUIs which we are already creating. So as of now we have been using the layout manager and we are setting it to null, but in this session we will be talking about how we can make use of different types of layouts. So all of the layouts we will not be discussing in our discussion. We will just be talking about very few of them, 3 of them to be precise in this video. First one is border, the second one is grid layout, and the third one would be the scroll pane. So layout manager, basically it is an interface which is implemented by all the classes of layout manager. So if we are setting it as null, there is no default layout manager of the of Swing. So it will simply place the components one after the another. But however, if we want to arrange the components in a specific way, that we will be discussing it. So today the first example which we will discuss is the border layout, and it is used to arrange the components in 5 different regions: north, south, east, west and center. So let us first execute this program and see what do we mean by the directions. So let us execute it. That is java c border.java. Then we will execute it. So when we are executing it, so you can see there are 5 different buttons which are created in the north direction, south, east, west and center. And this border layout basically provides 5 constants for each of the region. Okay, and the constants are basically the final instances of north, south, east, west and center. And we can use different constructors. The first one is a non-parameterized constructor which is border layout, and it will simply be creating a border layout without any gap between the components. So these are the 5 different components which we have, but there is no such gaps in between. However, if we are considering the other one, which is a parameterized constructor, that means we will be passing horizontal gap as well as vertical gap. It will create a border layout with a given horizontal and vertical gaps between the component. So we will have a definite gap in between these components if we feel like, by making use of that constructor. So first we will look at a very simple program for this particular layout. So initially we have to import these 2 packages, and then we will simply create a constructor which with the same name as that of the program, and an instance of JFrame is created here. Then we will be creating the buttons by creating instances from the JButton class as B1, B2, B3, B4 and B5. Now this button will be named as north, south, east, west and center. Now this labels we can change as per our requirements, and if we do not want any one of them, we can also avoid using it. Okay, how do we avoid using it? By commenting any of these additional adding any of this by removing any of these methods which is used to add the buttons to the layout. Okay, so first let us see this. Okay, so f is the instance or the object which is created from the JFrame, and in the frame we will be adding the first button, and where it would be added, it will be placed in the north direction. Okay, similarly the second one, it will be placed in the south direction. Third one, it will be stored in displayed in the east direction. then fourth is in west, and finally it is in center. After that we will set the size of the frame as 300 by 300, and we will be setting the visibility factor as true. So this is a very simple example. Now when we are executing this, we have to simply call the constructor from the main method, and we will get this particular representation or this particular display of the layout which we have created. Now this is a simple one. The next one is we will be adding gaps in between these components. So for that we have to use of the parameterized constructor, which is border layout, and we will pass the horizontal and vertical gap size. So I have passed here as 20 and 15 respectively. Now let me save this program and we will quit the previous one, execute the changed program. So when we are executing this, we will find that there is a definite amount of gap which has been introduced into the former representation. So as already mentioned, we have introduced 20 as the horizontal distance. That means the distance between these two components is 20, and 15 between the vertical components. So the distance between these two components would be 15. So likewise, if we want to create any other representations for the same using different positions, then we can go ahead with these kind of layout, and essentially we have to set the layout inside the frame. So this particular method needs to be called. Okay, the next program which we will be, or the next layout which we will be discussing is the grid layout. So for this, let me show you the program first. So this is the grid layout. Okay, right. So grid layout, first let us look into the output of this grid layout and how it looks like. So first let us compile this gridlay.java. Okay, so I have got an error here which is saying that, okay, so now let me run this grid lay. Okay, so this is basically the grid layout, and we are representing this particular grid, this particular 9 buttons in the form of a grid which has 3 rows and 3 columns. It is used to arrange, basically this layout is used to arrange the components in a rectangular grid where one component is displayed in each rectangle. So for this we will be using 3 different constructors. We can use 3 different constructors. First one is the grid layout constructor without any parameters, and it will create a grid layout with 1 column per component in a row. The next one is what we have already used here. That means we will be introducing the number of rows and number of columns without any gap in between the components. But here we have also used a horizontal and a vertical gap. So we have used another constructor with 4 different parameters, that is your number of rows, number of columns, and the horizontal gap and vertical gap. So if you see here, this constructor this will be having 4 different parameters. That means how many number of rows do we have, how many number of columns do we have, and what is the vertical and the horizontal gap respectively. So talking about grid layout, let us look into this program first. So in order to use this grid layout, we have to import these two packages, awd.star and swing.star, and after that we will be creating an instance of the JFrame here. So we will write the main instance generating code, or we will create the instance inside the frame and inside the constructor. In this particular line, if you see, we have created the frame obj as the instance of the JFrame class. So now we will be creating the 9 buttons, and I have simply named them as 1 to 9. Okay, so button 1, new button 1. So this is the code for creating or a particular button, and we are using J button. So we have already discussed about this, so working with buttons, so we can always go back to the previous videos and have a look at it, how it is created. Now we have to add these buttons into the frame. So for that we will use the frame object and add all the buttons. Now since we are not using any parameters inside the constructor, therefore the number of columns will be equal to the number of buttons which we are adding into the frame, and the row count will remain 1. Okay, now if we do not use this statement, because we are using this statement which is here, frame obj dot set layout new grid layout 3/3/2025, as already mentioned. So we are passing 4 parameters into this constructor now, which will create a grid layout for us here in this particular fashion. Okay, and with a horizontal and a vertical gap of 20 and 25. So the next is, we will set the size of the frame and set the visibility as true, and from the main method we will simply call the constructor. So this grid layout is very useful when we do certain we have to create small standalone applications, like let's say a calculator, or maybe we have to create certain online keyboards and such kind of user interfaces. So we can use this grid layout and make our applications as attractive as possible, because using this it will not be placing our components in a haphazard manner, and we can actually choose how many number of components we want to display in one row. You can always experiment with these components, like how many number of rows it should have and how many number of columns it should have, and accordingly place the buttons and place the components rather in different locations in whichever you feel like. Okay, so then we will this is the next layout which we talked about. Now we will be looking into the next layout, which is the scroll pane. So if we are considering the scroll pane, we will have to consider let me first open the code for it. Let me first open the scroll pane for it. So code for it. And so now scroll pane, basically the layout manager is used by the scroll pane, and scroll pane layout is responsible for 9 different components. So those 9 different components are a viewport, 2 scroll bars, a row header, a column header, and 4 corner components. So these are the 9 different components which are used in a scroll pane layout, but we will not be looking into all of them in details as of now. We will simply be looking at how we can create a very basic scroll pane. So let us first execute this particular code, java c scroll pane dot java, and then let's run it. Java scroll pane. So whenever we are looking into this, let's say I have what did I do was I simply imported or displayed a picture using this particular scroll pane. So now we have a horizontal scroll bar and a vertical scroll bar in order to scroll this particular image here. Okay, so now let us look into this particular program. So here, apart from having the swing pack, apart from having different types of classes which are already inside the swing package, we also need to have the image icon package inside this image icon class inside the swing package, as well as JScroll pane. Now here what we are doing, it is inheriting JFrame, so we will not be creating an instance of JFrame here, and we will simply use a constructor. On this constructor we will be writing down the heading of that particular frame, which is scroll pane example, and then let us first import the image. So for that we will use image icon img is equal to new image icon, and here I have simply mentioned the image under the same folder in which I have this particular program. Now if you have it in a different location, you can give the location along with the image name. And then we are creating a new scroll pane object png, and we will be using it inside the JLabel, that particular image whichever has been extracted and stored in img. We are also using the get content pane, and this get content pane basically will be simply using or simply this method would be adding that particular image inside that scroll pane. Okay, and we will be setting the size of the frame as 300 and 250, and we will be setting the visibility factor as true. Okay, so these are some of the things which are associated, or through which we can display this particular image inside the scroll pane. We can also add tables and other components inside this particular scroll pane, and likewise we can help, or we can use the scroller in order to scroll through the images or through our web pages. So this is a very basic example. You can always improvise on it. There are various other components which are associated to it that we have to discuss later, but as of now I believe all of us have got a brief introduction about and brief idea about how layout managers work and how you can actually play around with your components using the different layout managers. We saw the scroll pane. We also talked about the grid lay. Now if you are considering, let's say if I do not use this particular statement inside the grid layout, so what do I get here? Let us compile this and execute this. So if you are executing this, see we are getting 9 here. 9 means the last one will be printed inside, will be displayed inside the frame. This is because we are using a parameterless constructor, therefore the number of columns is equal to the number of buttons we are adding to the frame, and the row count will remain 1. So this row count will remain 1, and within this row only it is getting replaced every time. So if we want that our program should also display all the other buttons which we have added, we definitely have to use the grid, which is by setting the layout and passing the parameters inside the grid layout, and likewise we will get the values of all the buttons. It will not be replaced over the same row again and again. And we also talked about the border and border layout, and we saw how we can place our buttons and our components in different directions. of the same frame. So this is all for today's session. We will talk more about the other components of swing in my next session. Thank you.